Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. While the world and Europe has been focusing on the economic fallout of the coronavirus, democracy has continued to thunder along, notably with presidential elections taking place in Poland. The issue being that the campaign has been a particularly divisive one. So in this video, we'll take a look at what made the campaign so controversial and divisive, and ultimately what the incumbent, Andrzej Duda's re-election, means for Europe. If you want to support TLDR EU, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when we post. You can also lend us a hand by picking up one of our pin badges, featuring the Countries with Shoes designs. We have a bunch of countries, including Poland, so likely we have your country in stock. Check out the store, which is linked in the description below. With 99.97% of votes counted, Andrzej Duda, backed by the ruling Conservative and Nationalist Law and Justice Party, PIS, won 51.21% of the votes cast in the election, with Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, backed by the centre-right Civic Coalition, winning 48.79% of the vote. All in all, an extremely tight margin. So tight that many are highlighting that this vote is likely to be the closest since the collapse of communism in 1989, while at the same time having the second highest turnout on record. Regardless, what made the election campaign so controversial and divisive? Well, to be fair, Duda's campaign started off relatively moderate. Standing on his affiliated party platform, he touted the Law and Justice Party's vast infrastructure projects, as well as expanded and extremely popular welfare programs, including lowering the retirement age and offering a 500 zloty or €112 monthly bonus for children. The issue began when the polls began to tighten. From then, a relatively sharp turn in the campaign happened, ranging from alleged party attacks on national and foreign media outlets to accusations of foreign meddling and highly controversial general comments. In one instance, at a televised event arranged by government-owned broadcaster TVP, Duda appeared to tap into anti-vax sentiment, stating, "I am absolutely not in favour of any compulsory vaccinations. Vaccinations against the coronavirus should absolutely not be mandatory." Although his rival did come out in a slight show of support, stating that it's hard for me to imagine a situation where the government will mandate that adult people get vaccinated. The state broadcaster TVP has, however, not been truly impartial in its coverage of the election. According to the Financial Times, on the 9th of June, it ran a segment noting that Mr. Trzaskowski had attended the Bilderberg group, a group popular with conspiracy theorists that's described by the Washington Post as a mysterious gathering of the global elite. That's not to say that he didn't attend. Rather, he's on a long list of participants for the 2019 meeting, including the likes of the French Finance Minister, Jared Kushner, the Dutch Prime Minister, British MPs, the Director of LSE, and the Chairman of HSBC. So, while he did attend, it appears that the piece was broadcast to try and paint the candidate in a bad light. Further reports stated that he received a scholarship financed by George Soros, and insinuated that he would divert money from the government's popular welfare programs to meet Jewish restitution claims for property. Something that the leader of the PIS party remarked upon, saying, "Only someone without a Polish soul, a Polish heart, and a Polish mind could enact a policy like that," despite no evidence to back up the funding or the money diversion claims. The Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, an arm of the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, who monitor elections, published a report assessing the 2020 election, and stated that the TVP had failed its legal duty to provide balanced and impartial coverage, acting as a campaign vehicle for the incumbent and frequently portraying his main challenger as a threat to Polish values and national interests, as well as remarking that some of the reporting was charged with xenophobic and anti-Semitic undertones. In an attempt to draw support by appealing to Poland's traditional Catholic values and ultra-conservative supporters, at a campaign event in Brzesk, Duda claimed that the LGBT ideology was more destructive than communism, agreeing with a fellow PIS politician who said that LGBT is not people, it's an ideology. Going on to say, "The generation of my parents did not fight for 40 years to kick the communist ideology out of schools in order for us to now accept that another ideology should arrive that is even more destructive for people. We will not allow Poland to be taken away from us. We won't allow any ideology, neither communist nor socialist, nor any other to take it away from us, because this is our identity. And let no one try and lead our children on the wrong path, because we won't allow it." Emotion has been running high on both sides, with the research director for Europe and Eurasia at Freedom House writing an impassioned Politico op-ed, saying the choice between the incumbent and his challenger is a choice between increasing entrenched authoritarianism and a return to openness, tolerance, and democratic legitimacy. Regardless, the choice has been made. So what does Duda's re-election mean for Poland and Europe? All in all, Duda's re-election has cleared the path for legislative dominance. Had Duda's opponent been elected, he would have had the opportunity to veto parliamentary proposals, as PIS, the ruling party, does not have sufficient votes to override presidential vetoes. However, with Duda at the helm, PIS can implement its programme otherwise unhindered, and crucially, hold on to power until the next parliamentary elections in 2023. Also permitting the party's plans to overhaul the judiciary to continue, something that is set at loggerheads with the European Union. And Poland's relationship with the EU is far from strengthening. Prior to the election of Duda and the entry of PIS into power, Poland had one of the most pro-European administrations in the ex-communist East. Over time, this has markedly changed. The European Commission has already launched 4 legal procedures against Poland over rule of law concerns, and triggered Article 7 disciplinary processes, stating that Poland is breaching the bloc's fundamental values. Back in December, the European Parliament voted 463 in favour, 107 against, to strongly condemn the growing number of attacks on LGBTQ+ people, and were at pains to stress condemnation for Poland's LGBT-free zones, highlighting the non-discrimination clauses at the heart of the European Union. Something that was again stressed in a letter from the European Commission seen by EU Observer to 5 Polish local governors who declared their regions to be LGBT-free zones. According to EU Observer, the letter contained a thinly veiled threat to cut funding to Poland, noting that an assessment of the risk of discrimination would influence how funds were allocated. The issue nonetheless remains that the EU is somewhat powerless to stop them. As we touched on in our video about Hungary, the bloc has been more or less developed between PIS and Fidesz, the party of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, with each side vetoing sanctions, ensuring that they can't be put on one another. Article 7, the so-called nuclear option, sets out the process for sanctioning a member state, where there is a clear risk of a serious break by a member state of the EU's core values, with the process potentially concluding with the suspension of voting rights. The issue is that to get to the point of sanctioning, the European Council must unanimously vote to move the process forward. Poland committed to vetoing any sanctions against Hungary, and vice versa, in effect blocking the nuclear option. In 2017, the Law and Justice Party pushed through reforms to Poland's judiciary, lowering the retirement ages for judges from 67 for both male and female judges down to 60 for women and 65 for men, forcing some 100 judges to retire. Then, in 2018, subtly amending the rules that the process of appointing judges became controlled by the lower house of parliament, conveniently controlled by the Law and Justice Party. The Court of Justice of the European Union subsequently ruled late in 2019 that the retirement age reforms contravened EU law, arguing that under EU law, judges and prosecutors are entitled to equal pay and treatment for equal work, rejecting the Polish argument of positive discrimination. But that's still not the end of the story. Back in February of this year, the President signed what was termed by critics as a muzzle law, allowing judges who criticise governmental judicial reforms to be disciplined or fired. in the eyes of many, bringing the judiciary under government control. The European Commission in April subsequently formally launched infringement procedures against Poland, arguing that the new law undermines the judicial independence of Polish judges and is incompatible with the primacy of EU law. And these procedures are set to be the start of a long-fought battle between Poland and the EU, only cemented by Duda's victory this week. What do you think? Does Duda's re-election signal better and brighter things are to come? Or is this the start of an ever more authoritarian regime? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video. You can also find more from us across other social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. Special thanks to our Patreon backers, whose support makes videos like this one possible. If you want to find your name at the end of videos, then be sure to back us on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description.